The imperial palace. Imagine standing in a chamber filled with senators, generals, the most powerful men in the empire. No one speaks. No one moves. The air itself feels heavy. At the center of the room stands the Empress of Rome, not as a ruler delivering orders, but as something far more unsettling. A challenge has just ended. A test of endurance that pushed a professional courtesan to collapse by dawn. The room expects silence, an ending. But the Empress does not stop. She continues. Long after anyone thought possible. Long after the room falls into a stunned, uneasy quiet. And when it's over, no one applauds. Because what they've just witnessed isn't entertainment. It's a warning. This was never about indulgence. It was about control. Because the woman at the center of it all, Valeria Messalina, was not reckless. She was calculating. And what she built inside Rome would nearly destroy it from within. Welcome to a story history tried to bury. Because it forces an uncomfortable question. Why do we learn about emperors, but not the forces that controlled them? To understand her rise, you have to understand Rome itself. In the 1st century, Rome wasn't just powerful, it was absolute. Millions lived under its rule. Armies stretched across continents. And at its center stood the imperial court. A place where a single whisper could mean life or death. Into this world walked a teenage girl. Young, noble, almost invisible. She married Claudius, a man twice her age, newly raised to power after the chaos of Caligula's assassination. To Rome, she was a symbol of stability. A quiet bride meant to restore order. But they misunderstood her completely. Because in Rome, power wasn't just held by those who ruled. It was held by those who understood fear. Roman society was built on one fragile idea. Reputation. Honor was everything. Lose it, and you lost your life in all but name. One scandal could destroy a family. One rumor could end a career. One moment of public humiliation could erase generations. And Messalina saw something others didn't. That honor wasn't strength. It was weakness. Because the more a man had to protect, the easier he was to control. She had 3 advantages. First, her position. As empress, she stood above accusation. To question her was to risk death. Second, perception. No one feared a young woman. By the time they realized they should, it was too late. And third, silence. In Rome, shame was stronger than chains. People would endure anything, as long as it stayed hidden. Messalina turned that into a weapon. Whispers began in the darker corners of the city. Stories of an empress who moved unseen, who listened more than she spoke, who learned secrets no one else could reach. At first, no one believed it. Then the rumors grew. Powerful men began to change. Votes shifted unexpectedly. Alliances collapsed overnight. Decisions no longer made sense. Something unseen was guiding the empire, and no one could prove it. Behind closed doors, the court transformed. Banquets were no longer celebrations. They became performances, not of wealth, but of control. Every guest entered believing they were honored. Every guest left knowing they were trapped. Because inside those walls, the rules of Rome no longer applied. Only hers did. Imagine sitting in that room. You've been invited by the Empress herself. Refusing wasn't an option. At first, everything feels normal. Music, wine, polite conversation. Then something shifts. The doors close. The tone changes. And slowly you realize, this was never a dinner. It was a test. Not of loyalty, but of fear. No one spoke of what happened inside. Because speaking meant exposure. And exposure meant ruin. So they stayed silent. And in that silence, she grew stronger. Within just a few years, her influence stretched across the empire. Appointments changed hands. Fortunes moved without explanation. Entire families rose, or disappeared. Not through laws, but through leverage. Because she didn't need armies. She had something far more powerful. Secrets. Even historians today still argue about her. Writers like Tacitus and Pliny the Elder recorded her story, though many believed it exaggerated. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter how much was embellished, because the fear she created was real. Her story teaches something unsettling. Power doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes, it comes from understanding exactly what people are afraid to lose, and using it against them. In the end, her rise couldn't last. Power built on fear always reaches a breaking point. And when it did, it came fast. One decision, one moment of overreach. And suddenly, the system she controlled turned against her. She died not as a ruler, but as someone who finally realized the silence she created could not protect her forever. And yet, Rome tried to erase her. Her name struck from records. Her memory condemned. A punishment reserved for the worst enemies of the state. But it didn't work, because stories like this don't disappear. They linger. And maybe that's why her story still matters. Because systems built on silence and fear didn't end with Rome. They just changed form.